That's what I just said. Approximately 30, maybe 45 minutes about this part. Ethical considerations while doing P4C online. Can I hear you first? What goes through your mind if you read this? Ethical considerations while doing P4C online, that is. So, Carmen, may I ask you to give your initial thoughts about this?
Well, I think the first thing would be if you're using privacy things, for example, Google Classroom, or we weren't allowed to use a Zoom for our teaching practice because it wasn't a adequate level of privacy for the children. So I think take into account that you use the correct online methods or resources.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Can we hear Nastaran as well? So what do you think, Nastaran, when you see this?
For me, I feel maybe confidentially happened because students can hide themselves behind the camera by turning off the camera. Mm-hmm. If they feel not really confident with some topic or some discussion, maybe.
Yes, both. I think both of what you say is part of what we're going to talk about here. So those are indeed ethical considerations. So working with technology in terms of hardware. So you're talking about the camera, for instance, and whether or not people are shying away from camera contact if you were to do P4C online, for instance, with children that you do not necessarily know in a homeschooling situation or so, where you have put yourself out as a private tutor, for instance. But also Carmen mentioned rightly so that not all software is equipped with the proper privacy settings to make sure that you do your duties actually on a legal plane. And that is something that we're going to talk about right now, because it's not just a matter of doing things from a good practice perspective or doing things from an ethical standpoint or point of view, but it's also a legal thing. So that's why it is important to have a little bit of attention for this at the end of the course. Could you move to the next slide, please, Anastasia? Yes, there's two things that we could look into over here, and I'm not sure how much time I'm going to spend on this by actually opening the links, but just two things for you to have a look at. I have done some research myself on what countries are actually very advanced in putting secure policies in place for schools and for educators, private and non-private, so public and private educators, to ensure that privacy issues are being met. And besides the quite recent developments in the European Union, we will talk about that, the so-called GDPR, there's another country that is relatively strict. I could have also mentioned Canada, for instance, but New Zealand is relatively strict with its policies, especially for the protection of primary school children and children of that age. So what you would see under these two links, and as said, I might as well not open them, is two things to look at. There's a lot of material that, for instance, the New Zealand government shares with people to, with educators to look into software packages and to really get to know the content and the specifics and the possibilities of software packages. And you see an example here from about Zoom. So as you know, there is a free Zoom account which you can use, but you can also use a paid account, and especially the free Zoom account in the beginning of the pandemic got quite some negative publicity because there was a lot of Zoom bombing going on. It's even become a verb, in which extreme right extremists entered into non-protected public free Zoom rooms and shared their extreme right, racist content with harmless participants that did not really take notice of what was happening at that particular point. But Zoom has updated their policies there. So even for the free space technology that they offer, it is now no longer possible, I believe, to Zoom bomb in the way that it was possible 2 years ago. So one angle, that's what I want to mention here, is that you can really look into what particular software package you are going to use and look at to what extent that package is privacy friendly and protects the users against potential misuse. And another thing that the government of New Zealand offers online is templates for student user agreements. And those templates can be very well tailored towards your own needs. So if you were to do any online P4C with children, for instance, in the context of your international school, then if you're going to work at an international school, then most likely you will fall under the jurisdiction of that school and you would not have to worry about any legal issues. But if you're going to do that not in your capacity as a teacher, but for instance, if you want to offer things on a private plane, which many international teachers do. So many international teachers work in either a public international school or in a private international school. And next to that, they offer tutoring sessions, for instance, and you could do a similar thing with P4C. Then it would be a good idea to draw up a student user agreement. And such a student user agreement for lower primary and for upper primary are also presented on this New Zealand government website. And they're not only specifically tailored to a New Zealand context, so you can very well use them in a global context. And the benefit, of course, of having New Zealand materials is that it is also in English. So these are a few things that I would recommend you to do if you, at a given moment, you were to dive into doing P4C online with children. So look into the software that you're going to use and look at the specifics and look at the privacy regulations in that software to make sure that you get covered and that you are not going to get any legal claims, for instance, from parents or caretakers when something goes wrong online. And the second thing is that you should always ask your participants to sign a student user agreement. And we will go a little bit deeper into that when we go to the next slide, which is about data protection in the European Union. And especially if you're using pictures or videos, and we've been doing that in this context rather lightly. So every now and then, Anastasia and I have taken a screenshot or a picture of us discussing and talking with a nice colorful picture on the side. So in this environment, when we work with adults, that is not necessarily a problem. But if you're working with children, the regulations in the European Union the regulations are very strict, and that has been put in place, I think, 2 or 3 years ago for the first time. The GDPR are the regulations, the General Data Protection regulations from the European Union. And it is important to know that even if you are not living in the European Union, or even if you are not a European citizen, but if you are working with people that are from the European Union or have an EU passport, for instance, all the work that you do in a professional context falls under that GDPR. So even if Anastasia, for instance, were to have a European class that she would teach online, and she would have, for instance, teens or children from European countries, EU member countries, then even despite the fact that the Russian Federation, of course, is not a member of the EU, she would have to work under the GDPR regulations. So it's good to have a look at these regulations, and under this link, the GDPR link, you would see a user-friendly explanation of what that General Data Protection Regulation schedule is about. It's legally binding, so it's not something that you can opt to do or opt not to do. And there's huge fines if you are not aligning with the GDPR regulations. And that can start with relatively low fines of 25 or 100 euros, but it can run into huge amounts of money if you are not following the GDPR regulations. And there's one thing that you have to look at specifically, and that is the special protection for children's data. Children have to give their consent to collaborate with you online, and they have to give you that consent in writing. So they have to beforehand give you permission to work with you. And children under the age of 13 need the permission of their parents as well, written permission, that is. And that's why it's also handy to have such an agreement to work with children online, either signed by themselves if they're over 13, or signed by themselves and their parents or caretakers. Especially in case you want to use pictures or videos, they have to deliberately give their consent to you that you can use them, even if you are not using them in a commercial context, so even if you use them in an educational context, for instance. So my advice there would be that if you want to work with P4C online and you would like to use pictures or videos or other summaries from work that you have done, and you would like to show that in another context, for instance, let alone share it over social media, that is something that you have to be extra careful with. You must very well look at the rules and regulations that have been put in place. And this GDPR policy is among the most stringent policies worldwide when it comes to privacy and fines that are being put on the heads of people that are not aligning with those privacy rules. It's also, I don't know whether you know it, but all organizations, even small organizations such as schools that only have 7 or 8 staff members, have to have a GDPR officer among the team members that looks specifically into this protection of privacy of, for instance, children that work online. And I think you can imagine why it is very necessary to pay attention to this, given the wave of bad news that sometimes comes to us when it comes to the violation of all kinds of rights of children. I don't have to mention sexual abuse here, for instance, but also just you cannot just sell an outing, for instance, that a child does in whatever session you engage them with, either for commercial or even for public purposes. So you have to be very strict on this. I think I emphasized this enough. Shall we move on to the next slide? Yes. If you hear all this, then, well, maybe I have scared you off, but if you hear all this and you have become an enthusiastic philosopher with children, and I think after 11 sessions with us in this course and looking at your commitment throughout during the course, we can speak of a few enthusiasts over here. So what if you, in the course of your career, maybe already early on, or maybe otherwise later, what if you want to engage into homeschooling in P4C and you see no place in your regular work to do any P4C, but you are going to run a P4C club, an online P4C club. What do you think would be the do's and the don'ts if you want to set up such a club? Let's start about the absolute don'ts first. Who may I invite to share here something with us? What is an absolute no-go? Bernard, are you still there? I think you're
thinking very deeply.
Okay. So you want to set up a nice philosophy club, and you have this brilliant idea, and you have been inspired by us, and you have done some work in the classroom as well, and you see more and more children get enthusiastic about philosophizing, and you think, hey, I'm going to set up an online P4C club. because then I can still continue, even if I switch jobs. I quit my job in Eindhoven and I go to Bangkok, I have a job, and I can still continue with that work online. Can you think of a few alleys not to walk?
Well, there's probably some very obvious bumps there, but well, I suppose you can't just start.
Right.
So you need to make that agreement. You need to set up a course overview.
Okay.
But that's a do, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. You can do as well.
Yeah. So create a website with information about yourself.
Is that a do or a don't?
That's a do.
Okay.
So the public knows who you are, and especially parents and caretakers know who you are, because you're meeting with their children in an online setting.
It's a really delicate thing. So especially when you're a male teacher, I think there's an extra burden on your shoulders to make sure that you are acting really out of the best interest for the children, and that you have no hidden agenda or so. I think it is very important, especially in online communication with young children, to make that absolutely clear. And I think what you just said, making a website, introducing yourself, being transparent, maybe also mentioning this, that you are aware of the fact that there's all kinds of privacy issues in there, and for that reason you have decided to go this particular way and to ask the participants for their consent, think of doing research. It has a lot to do with, or it has a lot of overlaps and similarities with doing research, I think. So that could be a good start. Anything else? Do's or don'ts? Let's grab them both.
Carmen, yeah, of course.
Okay. I'd say, well, it's oddly specific maybe, but like absolutely don't is that you put links to join either on like your session on Facebook or any other social media, so that just anyone can attend. But that's very specific. And maybe it'd be good to consult either with like a PDR. That's like expert or somewhat, or thoroughly read through, the guidelines beforehand.
Legal expert. So make sure you involve a legal expert and have your approach checked beforehand. For instance, that could be a good way forward. And you said something about social media. Now, the good thing about social media, if there's any good thing, is that a lot of people find it very attractive to share things. That's what social media for, right? So enthusiasm can be shared through social media as well. Which medium do you think would be an appropriate medium to share your practice of philosophy for children with? Is there any medium that you think is?
Well, maybe LinkedIn, because that's a very professional atmosphere.
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't add like student examples in there, like specific examples, but just your overall experiences and what you've noticed, and that maybe.
Yeah. Okay. There's no one right answer here. I'm just trying to harvest some ideas here, so that could be a good way forward. Okay. Thank you, Bernard. You too. Thanks for sharing. Nina, do you have any ideas? So do's and don'ts. And again, the original question was, suppose you want to start with P4C in a homeschooling context, and there's, okay, let's assume there's no longer a pandemic, but you would still think of some hybrid ways of working. So you have some offline content, you have some online content. Could you share some do's and don'ts with us as well that you see? Nina?
Thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Yeah, well, the thing that came to my mind was also actually the way to sort of start this. Like you can't just start. You need some sort of yeah. I don't really know how to explain this. Some sort of
preparation? Are you thinking about any kind of preparation or something else?
Yeah, like of course you need your preparation, but you also need to be able to gain like participants, and you can't just start kind of approaching people. So, but that kind of circles back to what Carmen just said about the social media and then how to attract the right crowd. But I think that in that process of kind of promoting your course and then starting it, you need to consider like how do you get the right kind of people in your course, and not I'm not really sure how to approach your audience. Maybe that's something to consider.
Advertisement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of ethical stuff goes in there as well, because you can't just go out there and say, hey, you can, of course, but
do you have ideas about how you could do that? Because that's another branch that we haven't touched upon, we haven't talked about. So how to find people that you could potentially do P4C homeschooling with, if you were to do that?
Well, I think that if you would create some sort of overview of what you would be doing, to make sure that you run that by people who are specialized in this field, and to kind of get their feedback and maybe ask for comments to put them as like a reference of, hey, they know I'm a good person and that I've prepared this course and that I'm actually there to, that I'm reliable enough and of a person or a teacher or a session leader, whatever you want to call it, to do this.
That's about it for the moment? Not
all of it, but all that my mind comes up now.
May I build on Nina's ideas? So I guess there are a lot of kind of communities of people who do homeschooling, and they have offline and online events where they share their experience, their methods, approaches, problems, and etc. Even that we can speak about educational conferences in general, there are plenty of them, and you can think of your potential audience and like topics they might be interested, and visit some of these events where you can listen at first. What are they concerned with? What really interests them, like their pain, their aims, their values. And then the way we had a look at the curriculum, one of Marcel's sessions, and we literally saw some sentences, some formulations that were really about something that P4C can do or can help us achieve. So you can do a kind of research. You can visit and listen first. Like think through your like presentation, something you would like to train at first, to emphasize it first in your practice, and then share, or like just it usually happens, suggest a trial lesson just to try if it works. And again, offline or online. The one don't that I would suggest is, especially when you start, and I guess even later, don't try not to have a small group, especially with young children, like 4 or 6 people maximum when you start. Maybe 8, but that's better, I guess, for rather experienced, or for kids that are not very young, from 9, 10 at least. Then you can maybe have a bit more.
Why? Why?
To
a small group.
So because it's really different when you work offline and online, and in order really to see everybody, not to lose, to have this personal contact. It's better to start maybe you would be ready to work with bigger groups. Of course, that's up to you. But when you start, I guess it's really very important to, if it's possible, you can ask.
Okay. Because I thought that you say that working with the big group. That's why I was a bit confused. So a small group.
Yeah, that's because it's really complicated. And yeah, in order to start, not to have a mess from the very beginning, think, oh, I can't do it at all, or like these children are crazy or whatever. Just to handle it. Nina, yeah, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was also thinking, what came to mind is to really think through your topics. Like if you want it to be like a controversial philosophy kind of group, or if you want to discuss the basics or whatever, because I think both require different approaches. Like if you want to talk about a topic as religion, for instance, that would require a way different approach than if you would talk about nature, for instance. So I think that that's something to consider as well that could fall under ethical considerations.
Absolutely, and it's also very much context dependent. So it depends very much on who you would invite. Even in a small group of 5 or 6 people, if you have people from a very wide cultural range, ranging from people from China, for instance, depends where from China. If you have people from if you were to have someone, I don't even know whether the Chinese government would allow people to get in touch with Westerners, but if you were to have a student from Xinjiang, for instance, where the Uyghur population is living, and then you would talk about religion, for instance, that would almost be an impossibility for that participant to talk about that, because in her own or his own situation, it would even be completely restricted to talk about that. And then on the other hand, of course, if you would have a Chinese student from Taiwan, for instance, which is a very liberal country with a very liberal atmosphere at the moment still, then you would have a very different situation already. So that it depends also very much where your learners come from and what kind of topics you can address, for sure. Yes, you're absolutely right there. So we didn't even mention that. So I was only focusing on the organizational bit, but the content bit is also very important. And I agree completely with Anastasia, the smaller groups to begin with are very beneficial. I think both for you to get acquainted to working online in the first place and working online on such, well, it's not an easy topic, philosophy, to do that online with learners. It's something else than tutoring French grammar, for instance, which is pretty much straightforward. And philosophy has all these hooks and differences and different angles and calls on you as an educator much more, I would say, also from an instructional perspective. So there's much more to it than just the ethical part and the content part. It's also quite a complicated subject or topic or whatever you want to call it to teach. Can we go back to the presentation, because I think we have two.
Maybe, wait a minute. Maybe Nestoran has something to add or to ask here.
Could be.
No, I don't have it.
Okay. Anyone else? Because I don't want to leave out anyone, of course, in this. Okay. Then, as last, I think maybe the thing that sums it all up is actually a code of conduct that you could draw up for yourselves. And again, I have relied here on the New Zealand authorities, educational authorities that have written up. No, this is not true. I've actually relied on the University of Leiden here, who have a very good code of conduct, both for students as well as for lecturers of the university. And you can take that as a draft or as a template to look at what kind of expectations one should actually have if you are supposed to act along the lines of a code of conduct. This is also something that connects to what Bernard has shared earlier on. So it could be something that you can put on a website, or you can make a link on your website where you say, look, this is my code of conduct. And if I'm going to work with your child or with your pupil, then you can expect me to follow this code of conduct. So it gives very clear, transparent ideas of what your audience can expect from you. Also, it gives you an idea of things that you may have not thought about yourself. So in that code of conduct, you already see a few behaviors that that may make you aware of how you should behave when you work with people online, especially with very young people. I think, Anastasia, that was about it, because we have already talked about the last slide. If you go to the last slide, then making a personal plan, what you have to arrange before engaging in homeschooling P4C online. These numbers are random, of course, so it's not that you have to consider 3 points, but it's just to give you an idea that you do have to make a plan for yourself of what you have to arrange, other than the content or the materials that you're going to work with, or the audience that you have in mind. But also from an ethical perspective, you really have to make an individual plan of what you need to do, and please take your point of view into consideration. So where you are could have quite some influence on what you can do as well. So not all situations around the world are equal, of course, and context needs to be considered as well if you're going to work online when it comes to homeschooling. Yes.
Okay, so may I add here something about this code of conduct, or like rules in the classroom? Maybe we mentioned it once during our sessions. I will stop sharing so that we see each other better. So actually, when you enter a new group, you can do it from the very beginning. It can be even your trial session. And I know that it is practiced not only in P4C, that's something that you can practice at any class, absolutely. You suggest the group you work with to create your own constitution. Yeah, so you create it together. Yeah, you may start with the question, okay, is it possible to live without rules? And yeah, here are the answers. So why yes, why not? And actually they come up with the idea that, yeah, we need some rules to communicate. That would be really handy and helpful. All right, that's great. We are not like faced the list of the rules with this incredible teacher. Yeah, we can work out the rules ourselves, even though they are quite obvious and regular, yeah, and very common. And then you can create this your own poster, anything during the first session. Then you can like hand it, or you can even ask, yeah, if you have a special department to make it, yeah, you know, on a design paper, yeah, beautiful one. But you really like negotiate the rules, and that's better that they come up with them, with the hand, with the listening, with yeah, different things. And it's up to you. You can start with it, and or you can try to have to experience some experience without rules to see how messy it can be, and that actually no one wants it. And then maybe, yeah, we should go back and work more on our rules. Maybe during practice you can see that you need to add something, yeah, like someone goes on interrupting or speaking without his or her hand raised before. So even like with very experienced ones, you discuss it again. Okay, if just knowing the rules doesn't work, so we can give this like warning 1, warning 2, warning 3. And in order to rule to work, we have to think about consequences. So what may happen then? Yeah, so what can be this kind of punishment or anything to make everybody follow the rules? And the last thing, yeah, my group came up with, and everybody agreed, it was a consensus. They said, okay, if yes, one participant receives 3 warnings, then he or she really misses a turn. So next time when you have a new question, a new activity, yeah, we'll listen to everybody, and this person answers at the very end or can't answer at all. Yeah, the most active, yeah, have to learn to listen to the others. Yeah, and give them some space. So just that was an illustration, and it's something, yeah, you can share as a in a circle, yeah, with them, that you think that this code of conduct is the following, that you would, I don't know, do never, for example, never interrupt or stop only in, yeah, this and this case. Yeah, so that's something you can do as well. Yeah.
That's more about the emergence of the code of conduct itself, or the rules itself. I think there's a slight nuance between the internal rules and the agreements that you have with a group if you're working with group members, versus the professional duty that you have as an educator to behave according to a code of conduct that you will use to also inform people that are not necessarily part of your group, for instance, the parents or the caretakers. But you're absolutely right. It's always much better to establish a code of conduct or a set of rules from the ground up, rather than proclaiming that these are the rules. That is actually a good democratic practice. That is such a good democratic practice that I'm also forgetting it sometimes. Okay. Anyone else about these ethical ethical considerations when you want to do P4C online? I know that someone in their evaluation, so thank you for answering the questionnaire first and foremost, the evaluation questionnaire. Someone answered that they would have liked to see a little block or a session on ethics and ethical dilemmas, which is another thing, of course. So content-wise, who was that? And do you want to speak up? And could you say something about it? Yes, Nasra?
It was me, because I think, for me, I think in my perspective, it's really important, as I said before, because when you want to teach philosophy, many questions maybe arise, and it's not only about the freedom countries or democrat countries, because you are teaching in international school and you have a student from different countries, Turkey, Iran, or any countries, and maybe there is some biases. Because I remember that, I'm not sure that you sent this article or I found the article, because it was 4 things that arise when you teach philosophy. One is politics, taboo, and religious. And I think another one is like the dilemma or something, behavior or some cultural. That's all teachers need to take care of this when they teach about the philosophy. And sometimes, especially if you are young and you are not really aware of the social issues of different countries, and you need to be aware of that, because you need to protect yourself. You know, that was, for example, I'm not saying that, would be like so dangerous, like that was happened in France, I think last year, for a teacher. But you need to know that, because some topics or some discussion or some question would be really dangerous or maybe sensitive.
That's really
and
a
you
good
need
point.
to know that.
Yeah, that's really good point, Nasran, and thank you for bringing that up. I'm not always aware of the fact myself, so thank you for bringing this up, that some backgrounds of teachers or some contexts of countries are so obviously dangerous to bring up certain issues that you need to consider for yourself, am I willing to address this issue? Do I want that? And before you can answer that question, you first have to be aware, or be made aware maybe, of the fact that it is sometimes a difficult thing to discuss a certain issue or a certain topic, depending on where you come from, and also depending on where you teach, and maybe also depending on the audience that you teach. Now, this is a very gradual thing. This is something that happens on a spectrum, so it is not black and white at all. And there's also another important element here, and that is the risk of self-censorship. So if you decide already beforehand not to teach certain subjects because you anticipate that there may be potentially a risk in teaching that subject, or you may potentially harm participants in the class, or be it online or offline, and for that reason you decide not to address it, then we have also the issue of self.
I know that, but I think people need to know it beforehand before they decide it, because some maybe are not really aware of that.
No, you're right.
For example, I watched a movie, I think 2 years ago, with some of my classmates, and it was about a terrorist attack that happened in Norway, I think. I don't know in which year, and it was against the Muslim. And the guy who went to prison, he ordered pizza. For me, from Iran, it was like a shock. He is in prison and he ordered pizza. You know that? And he killed a lot of people. But for example, in a prison in Iran or in Thailand, you don't have this right.
No.
That is completely different world. That's why I think it's teachers' right to be aware of the both sides, then they can decide it. If you are not aware of that, how you can decide it?
Yes, and thank you. And there were more people that referred to. There was one other respondent to the evaluation questionnaire that said something like, "We dove right in at the beginning." So maybe an introductory session as to discuss a little bit more about the ins and outs of philosophy for children, a little bit more context before we actually start. That would also be a good session. Maybe you were also the same person. I don't know. Maybe it was someone else. But some more context could be beneficial, and maybe we have taken a few issues for granted, and thinking that you were already aware of that. That could have been the case.
Yeah, what Nastaran asks about, it's really highly important and very complicated, and
it is.
I'm even thinking, so how can that be? Who can help? And I don't know, name a number of topics that are really like hot and dangerous. And I think maybe such a session can be prepared by a professional in cultural studies, someone who is trained in this field and really knows about these do's and don'ts in when you communicate with different people from different countries. I actually have a person like that, and
you have a person.
Yeah, I have a person. I mean, that's a Russian expression, I guess. Sorry if it sounds terrible in English. I know a person. Know a person, a wonderful one who is really. He is a specialist in this field, and she knows about P4C as well. She's actually one of Russian winners when she was 17. She took like second place in this international essay competition, philosophical competition, and now she's an interpreter, and she works a lot with foreigners, and she has her own agency, and yeah, she prepares different trainings considering these different approaches, the way you can negotiate, communicate, even write letters and many different things with people from different countries. So I will definitely talk to her if she's able to do such a session, and thinking about hot ethical issues that can be a problem at the session, because she really knows what P4C is. So thank you, Nastaran. And now I have in mind something that can really help in this field.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is to finalize this point, it is indeed sometimes very difficult, Nastaran, for people who have always lived in free countries, such as the Netherlands, for instance, to really identify with the possibility that you need to watch your mouth, and that you need to be very careful whom to trust, and that there are some things that you cannot speak about. I mean, I can, if I want to, I can just insult the King of the Netherlands, and I regularly do that. Not only in private, not because I want to tease, but because I have an opinion about certain things. I would not very often do that in class, by the way, but it's really hard to imagine for people who have always lived in a free society what it means to be restricted and what it means to be silenced and what it means to be very careful and tread on your toes when you want to address certain issues. So I think you're right that it deserves some attention if we want this course to be truly an international course for international educators that want to do P4C. Yeah.
But even if you teach it in international school in Netherlands, also you have, or in Germany, you also you have to consider it because it's international. But anyway, local school, I think, is going to be almost international because of immigrant nowadays. So you know
because
that.
Of what? Sorry?
The local school in Netherlands, for example, not international. They also getting a little bit international because they have a lot of immigrant students.
Okay. Yeah.
They are not all Dutch. So I think that is important to consider it. So it's not only for a specific country. So
no, I agree. Okay, I think we can close, as far as I'm concerned, my contribution to this session when it comes to ethics and ethical considerations. It is far from complete. I'm very much aware of that, but I just wanted to bring it up and to well, not diminish any enthusiasm, but make you aware of the fact that there's a few things that you need to think about if you're going to engage with learners online. That's what I wanted to bring up, what we wanted to bring up. Yes.
Let's have 5 minutes break and a bit more practice for you. I'm really waiting for it. Okay.
5 minutes?
Yep.
Okay, 5 minutes it is. I'm going to stop the recording then for 5 minutes.